But we begin tonight with the disgusting lies that Donald Trump continues to elevate about the Haitian immigrant community in Springfield, Ohio. People who are just trying to mind their own business, go to work and school every day, and live their American dream. Yet this man, who has hordes of followers willing to enact violence on his behalf, as seen on January 6th, has managed to level down beyond being a dusty old racist grandpa red-pilled by Facebook, and way beyond mere insanity and derangement and cognitive decline. And he has leaned fully into intentional demonization and dehumanization of immigrants. In this case, immigrants with green cards, like the ones 2 of his 3 wives had, as his last desperate bid to claw his way back into the White House so he can stay out of prison. And while his comments have become everything from a TikTok meme to a punchline on late night TV, just imagine if you were on the receiving end of this garbage. It wouldn't be funny to you or to your kids. In fact, it could be life-threatening. The city of Springfield has received 2 bomb threats since Donald Trump spread this lie on Tuesday, resulting in the evacuation of 2 elementary schools. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and their horde of politician and street MAGA supporters bear full responsibility. The mayor of Springfield told reporters that the individuals calling in the threats cited their frustration with immigration and the Haitian community in Springfield. The mayor also said they needed help, not hate. Think about that for a second. Donald Trump and James David Vance, who spends most of his time hectoring childless women who have cats, have now put innocent children's lives at risk by lying about Haitian immigrants and turning them into boogeymen who will eat your pets. And to be clear, they are continuing to promote this lie, even though they know it's a lie. Now, if you want to understand the anatomy of a racist lie, let's start where way too much of the garbage inside Trump's brain comes from. Neo-Nazis. According to NBC News, Blood Tribe, a national neo-Nazi group, was among the early purveyors of the pet-eating smear in August, posting about it on Gab and Telegram, 2 social networks popular with extremists. The lie then crossed over into mainstream circles when, without evidence, people on a Springfield Facebook group promoted the bogus claim that Haitian immigrants were stealing neighbors' pets and eating them, and killing ducks and geese for food. NewsGuard affirmed that Monitor's misinformation tracked down the individuals who made the initial claims. And surprise, they could not say that they had any firsthand evidence to support them. It was all hearsay. It was Donald Trump's running mate, James David Vance, who then mainlined this lie. He first complained about the influx of Haitian legal immigrants who he lied about, claiming during a hearing with Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, back in July, that they were not in the country legally, and accusing them of draining resources. Clearly not satisfied with the damage he did there, Vance doubled down, claiming that reports now show that people have had their pets abducted and eaten. When reporters asked the senator for any evidence at all of his claims, his Ohio staff failed to provide any. That didn't stop conservative trolls like Charlie Kirk, Elon Musk, and others to spread it even further, who spread it, even further. And as often happens, stories like these are often fed by a kernel of a real thing that then gets twisted to fit the lie. In a case that some were confusing with Springfield, police in Canton, Ohio, 175 miles away in another part of the state, recently charged a woman with cruelty to companion animals for allegedly killing a cat in a neighborhood in front of multiple people. According to USA Today, that's according to USA Today. And guess what? Also according to USA Today, that woman was not Haitian. She was an American from Ohio. Here's another thing they're lying about. Haitian immigrants supposedly stealing geese. That lie stems from an image that has been shared of a man carrying a Canada goose, which, like the woman in Canton, morphed into a claim that Haitian immigrants were eating wild geese in Springfield. A reverse image search leads to a month-old Reddit post claiming the image was taken in Columbus, Ohio, 45 miles east of Springfield. The photographer behind the now viral goose photo spoke with a local NBC affiliate and said his original intention was to document a weird thing he saw in Columbus, not Springfield. And he was taken by surprise that the image was repurposed to spread this lie. He also added that the individual was not, I repeat, not Haitian. Here's another big lie that Trump and Vance are so good at spreading: that Haitians are the unwelcomed root of all of Springfield's problems, and as a result should be punished for it by deporting them to Venezuela.
In Springfield, Ohio, 20,000 illegal Haitian migrants have descended upon a town of 58,000 people, destroying their way of life. We will do large deportations from Springfield, Ohio. Large deportations. We're going to get these people out. We're bringing them back to Venezuela.
What Nazi curious grandpa won't tell you is that Springfield welcomed immigrants to their hometown because they were suffering such a massive population decline as businesses left the area. Just take a look at this 2014 headline that reads, in black and white, for the junior senator from Ohio to read, quote, Springfield seeks to be immigrant-friendly city, unquote. The Ohio Dispatch reported that Springfield actively took steps to attract new businesses. Their efforts worked. In 2022 alone, 3 companies announced plans to invest more than $100 million in Springfield on expansions. This happened to come at the same time that many Haitians sought refuge in the United States due to gang violence in Haiti that, of course, is fueled by the constant destabilization of that country by France and us. The Haitian immigrants hired at area companies have been background checked and issued Social Security numbers and work permits. They pay taxes, but are not permitted to vote. The Republican governor of the state, Mike DeWine, went on Fox News, well, we'll just say Fox, to extol the values of these workers.
They came for jobs. When you talk to the employers who are employing them, they'll tell you, look, they're very hard workers. They're very family-oriented. One employer was quoted saying, I wish I could hire 100 other ones to fill the jobs that we have. So that's why they came.
And this isn't even the first time Haitians have been the victims of racist fear-mongering by Donald John Trump, son and grandson, and 2-time spouse of immigrants. He called their home an Essel country and said allowing them to seek refuge here was dangerous because they all, quote, have AIDS.